The year is 930 AD. A man named Grimur Gveldolfsson stands on a patch of green earth in a remote valley in western Iceland. He is not a king. He is not a great warrior, though he has seen his share of fights. He is a farmer, his hands are hard from the plow and the fishing net. His wealth is in sheep and a few hardy cattle. For years his life and the lives of his neighbors have been governed by local chieftains and the memory of old laws from Norway. But disputes fester. A stolen sheep can lead to a blood feud that wipes out whole families. There is no final court of appeal. There is no single place where all men are held to the same standard. The news has traveled across the island. It moved slowly by word of mouth from one farmstead to the next. A man named Ulfljótur, who had been sent back to Norway to study the laws of the Gulating, has returned. He brought back not just a set of rules, but an idea for a general assembly, an Althing, a place for all free men of Iceland. A place to make laws and to judge disputes for the entire country. Grimur is skeptical. He has packed dried fish and a small skin of ale for the journey. It will take him nearly 2 weeks to walk and ride his shaggy horse to the designated site. He travels with 2 of his neighbors. They are all leaving their farms at a crucial time. The risk is great, but the promise is greater. The promise of a place where a man's word, backed by his neighbors, might matter more than the sharp edge of another man's axe. They arrive at a place of astonishing geology, a great rift valley, torn apart by the earth itself. On one side, a sheer cliff of black rock rises like a wall. This is the Almannaja, the Everyman's Chasm. Below, a river flows, and a wide, grassy plain stretches out. This is Thingvellir, the Assembly Plains. Hundreds of people are already there. Tents of white homespun cloth dot the landscape. The air is thick with the smoke of campfires and the murmur of voices from every corner of Iceland. Grimur sees powerful chieftains, the Godar, with their followers. They are easy to spot with their fine wool cloaks and the silver rings on their arms. But he also sees men just like him. Farmers, fishermen, traders. They are all here. For 12 days, this small patch of land will become the capital of Iceland. He makes his way toward the Logberg, the Law Rock. It's a natural outcrop at the top of the chasm wall. Ulfljótur stands there. He is an old man now. His voice, however, is strong. It carries over the assembled crowd. He is not reading from a book. There are no books here. He is reciting the law from memory, the laws of inheritance, the laws for theft, the laws for murder, the compensation to be paid for a lost eye, a broken arm, a slain horse. Grimur listens. He doesn't understand every detail, but he understands the core of it. This is a system, a framework, a way to solve problems with words instead of weapons. He watches as 2 men bring a dispute before a panel of chieftains. He hears the arguments, the calling of witnesses who swear oaths on a sacred ring. He sees a judgment delivered. Money changes hands. An apology is given. A feud is averted. This is not a perfect democracy. The chieftains still hold the power. But Grimur realizes something profound. Here, on this plane, the chieftain's power depends on the law. He can be challenged. His decisions can be questioned in front of everyone. For the first time, Grimur feels like he is part of something larger than his own farm, his own valley. He is part of a commonwealth. The assembly will meet here in this same spot every summer for the next 868 years. It all started here with men like Grimur who took a chance on an idea. The idea that law could be a thing they all owned together. Number 20, it was a party as much as a parliament. The year is 1015. Ingrid is 17 years old. She has been looking forward to the Althing for months. Her father, Olaf, is a farmer from the Eastjords. He has a minor dispute to settle about a boundary fence with a neighbor. That is his reason for going. It is not Ingrid's reason. For her, the 2-week journey to Thingvellir is not about the law. It is about life. Their farm is isolated. For most of the year, Ingrid sees only her family, their farmhands, and the people of the next valley over. News from the rest of Iceland, let alone from Norway or the British Isles, arrives like a slow-moving trickle. But at the Althing, the world comes to her. As they ride down into the Great Rift Valley, the sight is overwhelming. Hundreds, maybe thousands of people are camped on the plains. It is a temporary city of turf huts and cloth tents. The air smells of wood smoke, roasting meat, and damp wool. The sound is a constant hum of conversation, laughter, and the clang of a blacksmith's hammer. Ingrid's father finds his usual spot to camp with other men from their district. While he goes off to talk strategy with his kinsman about the fence dispute, Ingrid is free to wander. Her mother has given her a small pouch of silver coins. She also has 3 finely woven wool blankets to trade. She heads for the market stalls set up along the river. Traders have brought goods from far away. She sees iron pots from Norway, something her family desperately needs. She sees whetstones from distant mountains, essential for sharpening tools. A merchant shows her beads of amber from the Baltic and shimmering green glass from the Rhineland. She runs her fingers over a bolt of English linen, smoother than anything she has ever felt. She trades one of her blankets for a new iron cooking pot and a small, beautifully carved bone comb. But the Althing is more than a market. It is a social event. It is the one time of year when young people from all over the country can meet. Marriages are arranged here, alliances are forged, reputations are made and lost. Ingrid sees a group of men competing in games of strength. They are lifting heavy stones, wrestling, and showing off. She watches a horse fight, a brutal and popular spectacle where 2 stallions are goaded into combat. She finds it more frightening than exciting. Later, she sits with other young women, sharing stories and gossip. Who is betrothed to whom? Who has had a child? Who has returned from a voyage to Greenland with a fortune in walrus ivory? She hears a poet, a skald, reciting a new verse he composed in honor of a powerful chieftain. His words are clever and sharp, and everyone listens intently. The poem is news, entertainment, and political commentary all at once. In the evening, the mood changes. Fires burn brightly outside the tents. The sound of a flute drifts through the air. People share ale and food. She sees her father talking not with his rival, but with the man's cousin. They are not talking about the fence. They are talking about the price of wool. They are finding common ground. Ingrid meets a young man named Bjarni. He is from the north. His father is a ship owner. He tells her about sailing to Dublin and seeing a city bigger than anything she could imagine. He is handsome and his smile is genuine. They talk for hours. Her father sees them and nods his approval. This is how connections are made. This is how a scattered people become a society. The law is the skeleton of the Althing. But the social fabric, this trade and sport and courtship, is its lifeblood. The legal cases might only involve a few dozen men directly, but the festival involves everyone. It reinforces bonds of kinship and friendship. It allows for the exchange of goods, ideas, and genetic diversity. Without the party, the parliament might not have survived. People came for the law, but they stayed for the community. For Ingrid, the fence dispute is a distant noise. The real business of the Althing is the weaving together of a nation, one conversation, one trade, one shared cup of ale at a time. Number 19, your vote was your chieftain. It is the year 985. Leif Thorvaldsson is a farmer with a problem. His farm is modest, but it is his. He has a wife, 2 sons, and about 40 sheep. He lives in a valley controlled by a chieftain, a Godi, named Olaf the Peacock. Olaf is a powerful man, known for his wealth and his grand hall. Every free farmer in the region is technically aligned with him. They are his thingmen, his thingmen. In return for Olaf's protection and his representation at the Althing, Leif is expected to support him, to follow him in disputes, and to pay a small tribute. For years, the arrangement worked, but lately Olaf has become arrogant. One of his men damaged Leif's hayfield by driving cattle through it. When Leif complained, Olaf dismissed him. Last month, Olaf demanded 2 of Leif's best rams for a feast, offering a price that was an insult. Leif feels powerless. He cannot vote Olaf out of office. The position of Godi is a piece of property. It is owned, inherited, or sold. It is not an elected office in our modern sense. Leif feels trapped. But the Icelandic system has a strange and elegant loophole, a safety valve for men in his position. While he cannot change his chieftain, he can choose a new one. He heard that another Godi, a man named Snorri, lived just over the mountains in the next district. Snorri was known to be a shrewd, but fair man. The law stated that any free farmer could change his allegiance. He just had to declare it publicly. This is a dangerous move. It is a public rejection of Olaf the Peacock. It will cost Leif in the short term. Olaf will be angry. His neighbors who remain loyal to Olaf might shun him. But staying is becoming unbearable. Leif discusses it with his wife. She is worried, but she trusts his judgment. At the next local assembly, the spring thing, Leif prepares himself. These local things were smaller versions of the Althing, handling regional matters. After the main business is concluded, Leif stands up. His hands are sweating. His voice quavers at first. He speaks the formal words required by law. I declare myself no longer a thing man of Olaf the Peacock. I now attach myself to the Godord of Snorri Godi. A Godord was the name for the chieftain's office and the group of followers attached to it. A silence falls over the small crowd. Olaf the Peacock stares at him, his face a mask of cold fury. A few of Olaf's men start to mutter, but Leif has spoken the law. There is nothing Olaf can do to stop him, not legally. To use violence here would be to break the peace of the thing, a serious crime. The following weeks are tense. Leif feels isolated. But then something interesting happens. Another farmer, who had also been wronged by Olaf, quietly visits Leif one evening. He asks how he did it. A week later, at another gathering, that farmer also changes his allegiance to Snorri. Then another. A Godi's power was not in his title. It was in his followers. His wealth came from the support of his thingmen. His influence at the Althing depended on how many men he spoke for. Olaf the Peacock suddenly realizes that his power is not absolute. If he treats his followers badly, they will simply leave. His Godord, his power base, will wither. He loses status. He loses income. He loses influence. This was the Viking version of democracy. It was not based on one man, one vote. It was a democracy of association. A free man's vote was his personal loyalty. He could grant it or withdraw it. This system created a marketplace for leadership. A Godi had to provide good governance, or he would lose his customers to a competitor. Leif Thorvaldsson did not overthrow his leader. He just walked away. And in doing so, he reminded Olaf the Peacock that in the Icelandic Commonwealth, power flowed up from the free farmers, not down from an untouchable authority. It was a subtle but profound check on the power of the elite. Number 18, the law was a person, not a book. The year is 999. The Althing is in session. The air is thick with tension. A new religion, Christianity, is dividing the nation. Factions are gathering, and there is talk of civil war. At the center of it all is a man named Thorgeir Ljósvetnagodi. He is not a king. He has no army. He is the Lawspeaker, and for the next 24 hours, the fate of Iceland rests on his shoulders. The office of Lawspeaker, the Lögsögumaður, was unique. In a society without writing, the law was not a text. It was a memory. The entire legal code of the Icelandic Commonwealth was stored in the minds of a few men. The most important of these was the Lawspeaker. Thorgeir was elected by the Godar at the Althing. His term was for 3 years. His duties were immense. Each summer he had to stand on the Logberg, the Law Rock, and recite 1/3 of the entire legal code from memory. Over his 3-year term, the whole law would be heard by everyone present. This public recitation ensured the law remained common knowledge. It was not a secret text controlled by an elite. Anyone could hear it. His second duty was to preside over the legislative assembly, the Logretta. If a new law was proposed or an old one needed changing, it was Thorgeir who managed the proceedings. His third and perhaps most crucial duty was to be a legal consultant. Anyone at the Althing, from the most powerful chieftain to the humblest farmer, could approach the Lawspeaker and ask for a legal opinion. What does the law say about a stolen boat? What is the correct procedure for summoning a man to court? His answer was considered definitive. He was the Supreme Court and the National Library rolled into one person. Now, in 999, he faces his greatest test. The Christian faction, backed by the King of Norway, wants to make their faith the national religion. The pagan faction, loyal to the old gods, Thor and Odin, refuses. Both sides are armed. A fight seems inevitable. The leaders of both factions approach Thorgeir. They agree on one thing: they will abide by whatever law he proclaims. It is an incredible act of faith in the system and in one man. Thorgeir accepts the burden. He returns to his tent, his booth. He lies down and pulls a heavy cloak of animal hide over his head, and he stays there. For a full day and a night, he does not move. He does not eat. He does not speak. He is under the cloak. This was a known practice. It was a form of deep meditation, a way to shut out all distractions and consult only his memory of the law and his own wisdom. He is thinking through all the legal precedents, all the possible outcomes. A law forcing conversion could lead to war. A law allowing two religions could tear the country in two. The next day, he emerges. He walks to the Law Rock. Everyone gathers. A hush falls over the crowd. Thorgeir begins to speak. He says that it is a terrible thing for a people to live under two different laws. The nation cannot survive it. Therefore, he proclaims there will be one law for all of Iceland, and that law will be that all Icelanders shall be Christian and be baptized. A roar of anger goes up from the pagan faction, but Thorgeir raises a hand and continues. He adds the compromises. It will still be legal to eat horse meat, a pagan tradition the Christians abhorred. It will be legal to expose unwanted infants, another old practice. And most importantly, people will be allowed to sacrifice to the old gods as long as they do it in private. It is a stunning piece of legal and political genius. He gives the Christians the public victory and the official title. But he allows the pagans to keep their private traditions. He finds a legal path that avoids bloodshed. Both sides grumble, but they accept it. They had agreed to abide by his law, and so they do. Thorgeir was not a king. He was a temporary custodian of the law. His authority came not from force, but from collective trust in his knowledge and his impartiality. He shows that in the Viking Age, the law was not an abstract concept. It was a living, breathing thing, embodied in the memory of a single person. Number 17, a national decision was made without a single sword drawn. Let us stay with that moment in the year 1000, though some accounts place it in 999. The story of Iceland's conversion to Christianity is perhaps the single greatest example of the thing's purpose. It was a national crisis solved by legal process, not by war. The pressure had been building for years. Olaf Tryggvason, the zealous king of Norway, was determined to convert the entire Norse world. He sent missionaries to Iceland. The first, a German bishop named Friedrich, had little success. The second, a native Icelander named Stefnir, was aggressive and went about smashing idols of the old gods. He was promptly outlawed at the Althing for his troubles. The king escalated. He held several sons of prominent Icelandic chieftains as hostages in Norway. He closed Norwegian ports to Icelandic traders. This was a serious economic threat. Iceland depended on Norway for timber, grain, and other essential goods. At the Althing of 1000, the two sides stood in opposition. The Christian faction was led by men like Hjalti Skeggiason and his father-in-law, Gizur the White. The pagan faction was led by chieftains who saw the new religion as a foreign imposition that would destroy their traditions and their independence. The mood was ugly. Insults were traded. Men began to arm themselves. A messenger arrived with grim news from Norway, and King Olaf had declared that if the Icelanders did not accept Christianity, he would kill the hostages and invade the island. The threat was now existential. The Christians declared that they would no longer share a law with the pagans. The pagans declared the same. The nation was formally split. It was the moment the Commonwealth could have died in a bloody civil war. At this breaking point, the leaders turned to the one institution they all respected: the law. Hallar Asidu, a moderate pagan chieftain, approached the Christian leader Gizur. He made a proposal. They would ask the Lawspeaker, Thorgeir Nagadi, to decide the law for everyone. Hallar even paid Gizur a sum of silver to sweeten the deal, a common practice to show good faith in an agreement. The Christians agreed. Thorgeir, a respected pagan priest himself, was seen as someone who could find a fair solution. As we know, Thorgeir went under the cloak. He spent a day and a night contemplating the abyss. He was not just thinking about religion. He was thinking about the survival of the Icelandic state. He was weighing tradition against political reality, independence against civil war. When he emerged and walked to the Law Rock, his speech was a masterclass in pragmatism. He did not argue theology. He did not speak of salvation or damnation. He spoke about society. His first point was a simple observation: it will be proven true that if we tear apart the laws, we will also tear apart the peace. He laid out the options. War would destroy them all. Two separate legal systems for one small island was unworkable. The only path forward was a single law, and given the pressure from Norway, that law had to be Christian. So he laid down his compromise. Everyone must be baptized. This satisfied the Norwegian king and the Christian faction, but he carved out exceptions for private pagan practice. This was a critical concession. It allowed the pagan chieftains to save face. They were not being forced to abandon their personal beliefs, only their public rituals. The law would govern public action, not private thought. It was a legal fiction, but a brilliant one. It allowed both sides to claim a partial victory. The Christians got their official religion. The pagans preserved their traditions in private. The hostages in Norway were saved. The trade routes were reopened. And most importantly, the Commonwealth was preserved. Iceland became a Christian nation not through conquest or a bloody revolution, but through a binding legal arbitration at its National Assembly. It was a political solution to a religious problem brokered by a man whose only weapon was his knowledge of the law. Number 16, women could divorce their husbands for hitting them. The year is 1056. Thorgerd lives on a farm near Lake Mævatin in the north of Iceland. She has been married to a man named Finnbogi for 5 years. The marriage was an arrangement between their families, as most were. Finnbogi is a decent provider, but he has a harsh temper. Twice during arguments, he has struck her, not a brutal beating, but a slap across the face, enough to leave a mark. Enough to wound her pride. In many parts of the world at this time, Thorgerd would have no recourse. A wife was her husband's property, but this is Iceland, and the law recited each year at the Althing gave women rights that were unusual for the age. One of those rights was the right to initiate a divorce. A woman could divorce her husband for several reasons. If he failed to provide for the household, if he was unable to perform his marital duties, and crucially, if he struck her. Thorgerd knows the law. She heard it recited at the local thing. She has talked about it with her mother and her aunts. The decision to act on it is still terrifying. A divorce would bring shame on Finnbogi and his family. It could start a feud. She would have to return to her father's household, but she cannot bear the indignity of being struck again. She decides to act. The law required a specific procedure. A divorce was not a private matter. It had to be declared publicly, in front of witnesses. The first step was to declare her intention at their home. She needs witnesses. She confides in her brother, who is visiting, and a trusted farmhand. One evening, with Finnbogi present, she stands by their bed and speaks the formal legal words. She calls her witnesses by name. She states that she is legally separating herself from her husband Finnbogi because he struck her. She then repeats the declaration at the main entrance to the farmhouse. Finnbogi is stunned and furious, but her brother is there, a strong presence that prevents him from becoming violent. The divorce is not yet final. The second step is to make the same declaration at the Althing. This makes it a matter of national record. A few months later, Thorgerd travels to the Althing with her father and brother. It is a long and arduous journey. When they arrive, they must find the correct court. Her father, an experienced man, knows the procedure. They go before the court for their quarter of the country. There, in front of the assembled judges, Thorgerd herself stands up and speaks. She names her husband, she names her witnesses, she states the grounds for the divorce that he struck her. Her witnesses then step forward and swear oaths that they heard her make the initial declaration at her home. The court does not debate the morality of it. They do not ask if she provoked him. The law is clear. And a man hitting his wife was a valid reason for divorce. The case is a procedural one. Did she follow the correct steps? Did she have witnesses? She did. The court confirms the divorce is legal. The financial settlement is also determined by law. And Thorgerd is entitled to the return of her dowry, the wealth she brought into the marriage. She is also entitled to a share of the wealth the couple accumulated during their marriage. She does not leave empty-handed. She leaves as a woman of some means with her legal rights intact. This was not an isolated case. The Icelandic sagas are filled with stories of powerful, assertive women who were not afraid to use the law to their advantage. A woman could inherit and own property. A widow could run her own farm and be the head of a household. The system was still a patriarchy. Women could not vote at the thing, nor act as judges or chieftains. But they were not powerless. They were legal persons with specific enforceable rights. The right to divorce a violent husband was one of the most significant. It shows that the Viking legal mind was concerned with more than just property and feuds. It also contained a concept of personal dignity, a concept that extended, at least in some measure, to the women of the Commonwealth. Number 15 being declared, an outlaw was a fate worse than death. It is 997. Gisli Surson stumbles through the desolate highlands of Iceland. His clothes are rags, his hair is matted. He is gaunt and haunted. For 13 years he has been on the run. He is a Skogarmadur, a forest man. He is a full outlaw. His story began with a web of family intrigue and a killing to avenge a sworn brother. The Althing investigated. Witnesses were called. Oaths were sworn. The court found Gisli guilty of the killing. The sentence was not execution. There was no state executioner. The sentence was full outlawry Skogangur. This was the most extreme punishment the Commonwealth could deliver. It was, in effect, a civic death. When Gisli was declared an outlaw, he ceased to be a person under the law. All his property was confiscated. His wife was declared legally divorced. His children were now considered fatherless. He had no rights. He could not own property, make contracts, or seek justice. Most terrifyingly, the protection of the law was completely removed from him. Anyone could kill him without consequence. In fact, the man who killed a known outlaw was often entitled to a reward. The phrase, "he is to be fed to the wolves," was not just a metaphor. Gisli was banished from all settled land. He was forced into the Skogar, the wild, uninhabited interior of the country, a landscape of glaciers, volcanoes, and barren rock. He could not seek shelter in any farmhouse. Anyone who gave him food or aid for more than 3 days would themselves be charged with a crime and could face lesser outlawry. His life became a desperate game of survival. He lived in hidden caves and crude shelters. He hunted birds and fished in secret. His wife, Aud, remained loyal to him in secret, risking her own safety to bring him food and news when she could. But he was constantly hunted. Men seeking reward or revenge for his original crime tracked him. The psychological toll was immense. The sagas describe his dreams, which became filled with dark premonitions and terrifying figures. He was utterly isolated, cut off from the entire human community. To be an outlaw was to be a ghost while still alive. This system served a practical purpose in a state with no police force. It outsourced enforcement to the general population. The community was tasked with expelling the offender. It was also a powerful deterrent. The fear of being cast out of society, of losing one's name, family, and legal existence was profound. There were 2 types of outlawry. Lesser outlawry, Fjorbogsgarder, was a temporary banishment for 3 years. And a lesser outlaw had to leave Iceland. 3 specific sanctuaries on the coast were designated where he could wait for a ship without being killed. If he successfully served his 3-year exile, he could return and have his rights restored. But Gisli was a full outlaw. His sentence was for life. After 13 years of hiding, his enemies finally cornered him. The Gisla saga describes his final stand. He fought with incredible bravery, but he was hopelessly outnumbered. He was killed on a remote cliffside. His story, and others like it, became a famous part of Icelandic literature. It was a cautionary tale. It showed the ultimate power of the thing. The assembly could not put a man in prison, because there were no prisons. It could not execute him, because there was no state to do the executing, but it could unperson him. It could erase him from the social contract. In the close-knit, interdependent world of Viking Iceland, this legal declaration was the most terrifying weapon of all. It was a sentence of social and spiritual death, with the physical death almost certain to follow. Number 14, you couldn't enforce the law, only sanction it. The year is 1011. A man named Mord Valgardsson stands victorious outside the assembly at the Althing. He has just won a major legal case against a powerful chieftain who illegally seized some of his land. The court, the Lagretta, has ruled in his favor. The land is legally his. The chieftain has been ordered to pay a significant fine as compensation. Justice has been done, or has it? Mord has a piece of paper in his mind, a legal judgment, but there are no police officers to escort him to his land and evict the chieftain's men. There is no sheriff to seize the chieftain's property to pay the fine. The Althing had a sophisticated legislative branch and a detailed judicial system. But it had no executive branch. It had no power to enforce its own rulings. This is one of the most misunderstood aspects of the Viking legal system. Winning your case was only half the battle. Enforcing it was up to you. Mord returns to his home district. He approaches the powerful chieftain and presents the court's judgment. The chieftain laughs. He has more men, more weapons, and more resources than Mord. The judgment of a distant court means nothing to him here in his own valley. He tells Mord to leave or be carried out. Mord is now faced with a choice. He can give up, and the court's ruling becomes meaningless. The entire legal system would be undermined if powerful men could simply ignore it. Or he can enforce the law himself. He spends the next few weeks gathering support. He goes to his brothers, his cousins, his brothers-in-law. He reminds them of their bonds of kinship. He calls on his neighbors and friends, men who value the law and do not want to see a powerful man defy it. Well, he shows them the formal judgment from the Althing. He is not a rogue actor. He has the full sanction of the law behind him. This is a crucial distinction. He is not starting a feud. He is executing a court order. After a month, he has gathered a party of 30 men. They are all farmers and landowners, not professional soldiers. They are armed with axes, spears, and shields. One morning, they ride to the disputed land. They do not attack immediately. Mord, as the plaintiff, approaches the chieftain's farm. He calls out, again stating the court's ruling and demanding that the chieftain and his men vacate the land and pay the fine. He gives him one last chance to comply with the law. The chieftain, seeing the armed party, must now make his own calculation. He could fight, but a fight would be bloody. If he kills Mord, who is acting with the force of law, his own legal standing would be destroyed. He would be prosecuted for murder at the next Althing. His support among other law-abiding chieftains would evaporate. He might win the skirmish, but lose his entire position in society. After a tense standoff, the chieftain relents. He is angry and humiliated, but he is a pragmatist. He agrees to withdraw his men from the land. He argues about the fine, and they negotiate a slightly lower amount to be paid in wool and silver over the next year. This scene played out again and again in the Icelandic Commonwealth. The system depended on the willingness of ordinary people to uphold the law by force if necessary. It was a form of legalized, limited self-help. The court's decision gave the victor the legal and moral right to act. It turned a private grievance into a public concern. When Mord gathered his posse, he wasn't just fighting for his land. He was fighting for the principle that the law applied to everyone, even the powerful. This lack of an executive branch was both the system's greatest weakness and its most unique strength. It was weak because a judgment could be ignored if the plaintiff was too poor or friendless to enforce it. But It was strong because it forced the entire community to be invested in the rule of law. The law was not something handed down from above. It was a collective agreement that the community itself had to be willing to defend. Number 13, the most important evidence was your friend's oaths. The year is 970. A farmer named Thorstein is accused of stealing 3 sheep from his neighbor, Einar. Einar is convinced Thorstein is the culprit. The sheep went missing one night, and the next day, a traveler claims he saw Thorstein near Einar's pasture. There is no other evidence, no footprints, no fleece caught on a fence. It is one man's word against another's. Einar takes the case to the local spring thing. In a modern court, the prosecution would need to present physical evidence or a reliable eyewitness. But in Viking Iceland, the most powerful form of evidence was character. The case would be decided not by what Thorstein did, but by who he was. The legal procedure for this was called compurgation, or an oath of purification. To clear his name, Thorstein did not have to produce a suspect or an alibi. He had to produce a specific number of oath helpers, or kavidar. The court, a panel of local landowners, determines the number of oath helpers required based on the severity of the crime. For the theft of 3 sheep, they might rule that Thorstein needs a 6-man oath. This means he must find 5 of his neighbors to swear an oath alongside him. This is where the real drama begins. Thorstein's task is now to go door to door, farm to farm, and ask his neighbors to literally stake their own honor on his. He first goes to his closest friend, Bjorn. Bjorn agrees immediately, but 1 is not enough. He goes to an older, respected farmer named Ulf. Ulf hesitates. Thorstein, he says, I've always known you to be an honest man, but Einar is stubborn. Are you sure you want to proceed with this? The Ulf is weighing the social cost. Swearing an oath for Thorstein means publicly taking a side against Einar. It could damage community relations for years. After much thought, Ulf agrees. Thorstein then approaches another neighbor, a man with whom he had a minor disagreement a year ago over a stray cow. The man refuses. I do not know what happened that night, he says, and I will not swear an oath on something I am not certain of. This refusal is a blow to Thorstein's reputation. The process is a public vetting of his entire life. Is he known to be honest? Does he pay his debts? Is he a good neighbor? A man with a poor reputation would find it impossible to gather his oath helper. No one would risk their own honor for a man they did not trust. A man's reputation, his drengskapra, was his most valuable asset. After a stressful week, Thorstein manages to gather his 5 men. They are all free men, landowners, and not related to him by blood. The law was specific on this point. Oath helpers had to be impartial neighbors, not biased kinsmen. Back at the thing, the ritual begins. Thorstein steps forward. He places his hand on a sacred ring consecrated to a god. He swears a formal, legally binding oath. I swear by the gods, I am not guilty of the theft of which Einar accuses me. Then his 5 oath helpers step forward one by one. They place their hands on the ring. Each man swears a different oath. He does not swear that Thorstein is innocent. He cannot know that for sure. Instead, he swears that he believes Thorstein's oath to be clean and not false. They are swearing to his character. They are telling the court, we know this man. We live alongside him. We believe he is telling the truth. If Thorstein successfully completes the oath with his 5 helpers, the case is over. He is legally innocent. Einar has lost. There is no appeal. The community has spoken through the oaths of its members. This system seems strange to us, but it was perfectly suited to a small rural society where everyone knew everyone else. It made justice a community responsibility. The verdict was based on a collective assessment of a person's long-term behavior and social standing. It was a system that judged not just the crime, but the man. And in Viking Iceland, that was the only judgment that truly mattered. Well, number 12, the landscape itself, was the courthouse. The year is 965. A young man named Eagle is attending the Althing for the first time. He has traveled from a quiet fjord in the west, and the sheer scale of the place, Thingvellir, leaves him speechless. He had expected a large field, perhaps a big hall. He did not expect the land itself to be the assembly hall. His father guides him through the Almanaga, the Everyman's Chasm. It is a long, deep canyon with a towering wall of black volcanic rock on one side. Walking through, it feels like entering a fortress built by giants. The acoustics are strange, voices echo and are amplified by the rock wall. His father tells him this chasm is the grand entrance, a place that humbles even the most powerful chieftains. They emerge onto the assembly plains. His father points to the great rock wall they just passed. That is the back of our courthouse, he says. He leads Eagle to a specific spot at the top of the chasm. This is the Logberg, the Law Rock. There is no throne, no building. It is a natural stone outcrop that offers a commanding view of the plains below. This, his father explains, is the heart of the Althing. This is where the Lawspeaker stands to recite the law. The rock wall behind him acts as a natural soundboard, projecting his voice across the gathered crowd. It is a piece of geological luck that made this place so suitable for a national assembly in an age before microphones. Below the Law Rock, the Legislative Assembly, the Lagretta, meets. It is not in a building. It is a designated circle on the grass marked out by ropes or stones. Here, the 48 Godar, their 2 advisors each, and the 2 bishops after the conversion sit on benches and debate the laws. It is an open-air parliament. His father then points to the river, the Oxera, that flows through the plain. And that river is also part of the law, he says. He shows Eagle a deep pool in the river. This is the Dreckinger Heiler, the drowning pool. Women convicted of serious crimes were executed here. Further along the river is an island, the Holmgang, or Dual Island. Certain legal disputes could be settled by a formal ritualized duel. The island provided a contained, neutral space for this ultimate form of arbitration. The entire landscape is co-opted into the service of the law. The booths and tents where people live for the 2 weeks of the assembly are arranged by region. Your men from the North Quarter camp in one area, men from the South Quarter in another. This geographic organization helps with mustering witnesses and holding the separate quarter courts. Egil realizes the brilliance of it. There was no need to build a grand capital city. Thingvellir was the capital, but only for 2 weeks a year. For the other 50 weeks, it was just a valley. This prevented the concentration of power in one location. The government was not a place, it was an event. The choice of this specific site was a deliberate act of political and geological genius, and it was located at the junction of Iceland's major regions, making it roughly equidistant for most of the population. The plains were large enough to accommodate thousands of people and their horses. There was ample water from the river and grazing for the animals. But it was the dramatic geology that made it so special. The Great Rift was a physical manifestation of the divisions in society. The Law Rock was a natural platform that gave authority. The river was both a source of life and a tool of justice. For Egil, the lesson is clear. The law of the Icelanders is not something alien or imposed from above. It is rooted in the very land they inhabit. The courthouse is not made of timber and turf. It is made of rock, river, and grass. The thing is not just held at Thingvellir, the thing is Thingvellir. The landscape gives the law its authority, and the law gives the landscape its meaning. Number 11, fines were calculated down to the smallest detail. It is the year 1020. Skapti the farmer is in trouble. Not big trouble, but expensive trouble. During a storm, a section of his fence collapsed and 3 of his pigs wandered onto the land of his neighbor, Odd. The pigs rooted up a patch of Odd's turnip field. Odd is a notoriously meticulous and short-tempered man. He has taken Skapti to the local thing, demanding compensation. This is not a case that will end in violence or outlawry. It is a civil dispute, and it will be settled with money. Or, more accurately, with a complex system of compensation payments known as magur, or fines. The Icelandic legal code, as recorded in the Gragas manuscripts centuries later, was obsessed with detail. It contained extraordinarily specific lists of fines for almost every imaginable offense. The guiding principle was that every injury to a person, their property, or their honor had a price. The goal of the court was not to punish, but to restore balance. Skapti and Odd stand before a panel of arbitrators, their neighbors. Odd presents his case. He lists the damages. First, the value of the turnips eaten by the pigs. Second, the cost of the labor to repair the rooted up ground. And third, and this is the crucial part, he claims compensation for the insult, the damage to his honor caused by Skapti's negligence. The arbitrators listen. One of them is known for his deep knowledge of the law. He begins to question them. How many turnips were destroyed? What is the going rate for a day laborer's work? How old were the pigs? The law had specific values for different types of property. A milch cow was worth more than a barren one. A trained hunting dog was worth more than a simple sheepdog. A 6-year-old horse in its prime was worth more than an old nag. The arbitrators would have known these standard values, but the most complex calculations involved injuries to people. The law specified fines for everything. A blow that did not break the skin had a certain price. If it drew blood, the price went up. If it broke a bone, the price was higher still. You know, there were specific fines for the loss of a front tooth, a molar, a finger, an eye, or a foot. These fines were also scaled according to the status of the injured person. An injury to a chieftain was worth more than an injury to a regular farmer. An injury to a free man was worth more than an injury to a freed slave. It was a deeply hierarchical system, but it was also predictable. In Skapti's case, the arbitrators deliberate. They determine a fair price for the turnips and the labor. Then they address the issue of honor. Since Skapti was not malicious, but merely negligent, the insult is considered minor. They set a small honor price for Odd. The final judgment is delivered. Skapti is to pay Odd a total of 2 ounces of silver. This was a significant amount, perhaps the value of a couple of sheep. The payment would likely be made not in coins, but in what was called ring money, actual rings of silver worn on the arm from which pieces could be cut off and weighed, or in goods of an equivalent value like homespun cloth or dried fish. Skapti is not happy, but he accepts the judgment. It is fair, according to the law. He pays Odd. The dispute is over. Balance is restored. A potential feud over some turnips has been resolved peacefully. This system of fines was the lubricant that kept the machinery of Icelandic society running. It provided a clear, non-violent path for resolving the hundreds of small conflicts that arose between neighbors. It acknowledged that a crime was not just an act against an individual, but an act that disrupted the social order. The payment was not just to compensate the victim, it was to heal the rift in the community. It turned a thirst for vengeance into a solvable economic equation. Every man and everything had its price. Number 10. Your reputation was your most valuable property. The year is 990. Egil Skallagrimsson, one of the most famous and feared Vikings of his age, is an old man now. He is a great warrior, but his deadliest weapon has always been his words. He is a skald, a master poet. His verses can praise a king to the heavens or destroy a man's reputation with a few cutting lines. One day, Egil has a dispute with a local landowner named Armod. It is a minor disagreement over a piece of driftwood that washed ashore. Egil believes it is his. Armod disagrees. Feeling insulted, Egil does not reach for his axe. He reaches for his vocabulary. That evening, at a feast, Egil composes and recites a short, mocking poem about Armod. The verse is clever, funny, and deeply insulting. It questions Armod's manhood, calls him stingy, and implies he is a coward. The poem is a nid, a legally defined form of slander. The hall roars with laughter. The poem is so good that everyone will remember it. It will be repeated at other feasts in other valleys. Armod's reputation is damaged. Armod is furious. He could challenge Egil to a duel, but Egil is a legendary fighter even in his old age. So Armod chooses a different weapon. He takes Egil to the Althing. The case he brings is not for the loss of driftwood, it is for the loss of honor. In the Norse world, a man's honor, or drengskapra, was his most important possession. It was a combination of courage, integrity, generosity, and keeping one's word. It was the foundation of his social standing. Without it, he could not gather oath helpers, his daughters could not find good husbands, and other men would not enter into agreements with him. To lose your reputation was to lose everything. The law recognized this. Slander and libel were serious crimes. The court at the Althing listens as Armad presents his case. He does not claim financial loss. He claims that Egil has unmanned him with his words. He recites the offending verse for the judges. Egil, a skilled legal mind himself, defends his actions. He might argue that the poem was just a joke, or that it was technically true. The legal arguments would be complex. Was the poem a full nid, which carried the penalty of lesser outlawry, or was it a lesser form of insult? The court would deliberate, they would examine the specific words used, certain phrases and accusations were legally defined as slanderous. For example, to accuse a man of cowardice or to use sexually insulting language was a clear-cut case. In this instance, let's say the court finds Egil guilty. The penalty for such a verbal assault could be a very large fine, often as much as for a physical assault. Egil, a wealthy man, would be ordered to pay Armad a significant sum in silver to regild his honor. The public judgment itself also helps to restore Armad's reputation. The law has officially declared that the insults were unjust. This emphasis on verbal honor had a profound effect on the culture. It is one reason why the Icelanders placed such a high value on poetry and sagas. Words had real power. They could build a reputation or tear one down. The sagas are full of characters who are good with words, and this is presented as a skill just as important as being good with a sword. The legal system's protection of reputation also acted as a form of social control. It encouraged people to be careful with their words and to resolve disputes through formal channels rather than through gossip and backbiting. Your name was your brand, and if someone damaged it, the thing provided a way to seek repairs, not with violence, but with the full weight of the law. Number 9, the first laws came from Norway. The year is 927. The island of Iceland has been settled for just over 50 years. The population is growing. Small, local assemblies have sprung up, but there is no overarching law for the entire country. The chieftains, the Godar, recognize that this is unsustainable. Feuds are becoming more common and more destructive. They need a unified legal code. But where would they get one? They are a new people in a new land. They decide to look back to their ancestral homeland, Norway. A man named Ulfljótur is chosen for the task. We know little about him personally, but his mission was of monumental importance. He was a chieftain from the east of Iceland. He was known for his wisdom and presumably his good memory. He was commissioned by the other chieftains to travel to Norway and create a law code suitable for Iceland. His journey was not a simple one. He spent 3 years in Norway from about 927 to 930. He did not go to the king. At this time, Norway was a collection of regions, each with its own laws and its own regional thing. The most famous of these was the Gulating, located on the western coast of Norway, the area from which many of Iceland's settlers had come. The law of the Gulating was a comprehensive oral code that had been developing for centuries. Ulfljótur studied this law. He likely sat with the Lawspeakers of the Gulating, memorizing the legal formulas, the procedures for prosecution, and the complex tables of fines. But his job was not simply to copy the Norwegian law. He had to adapt it. The Gulating law existed in a society with a king. It had royal officials and a clear social hierarchy topped by royalty. Iceland was different. The settlers had explicitly left Norway to escape the centralizing power of King Harald Fairhair. They were building a new society, a commonwealth of free farmers and chieftains without a king. So Ulfljótur had to perform a delicate act of legal surgery. He had to cut out every reference to the king. Any powers that belonged to the king or his officials in the Norwegian law had to be reassigned to the institutions of the new Icelandic Commonwealth. The power to prosecute certain crimes, for example, was given to the Godar. The ultimate authority was vested not in a monarch, but in the assembly itself, the Althing. He also brought back the structure of the thing itself, with its Lawspeaker, its legislative council, and its courts. The model was Norwegian, but the implementation was uniquely Icelandic. While Ulfljótur was away, his foster brother Grímur Geitscore was given another crucial task to find a suitable location for the new National Assembly. Grímur traveled all over Iceland. He was looking for a place that was accessible, had enough water and grazing for thousands of attendees, and had a landscape that was suitable for public speaking. He found the perfect spot at Thingvellir. The story says the land had recently become public property after its owner was convicted of murder, making it conveniently available. In 930, Ulfljótur returned. He brought with him what would become known as Ulfljótur's Law. He stood on the newly designated Law Rock at the first Althing and recited the laws for the new nation. These were the laws that would govern Iceland for the next 3 centuries. This origin story is important. It shows that the Icelandic Commonwealth was not a primitive system that grew randomly. It was a conscious and deliberate act of constitutional design. The founders looked at an existing, successful legal model and carefully adapted it to their unique, anti-monarchical political situation. They borrowed the best parts of the Norwegian system, while rejecting the one part they had crossed the ocean to escape the power of a king. It was a remarkable act of political and legal innovation. Number 8, it was a system run by amateurs. The year is 1045. Ketil is a farmer from the Westjords. His neighbor has built a new sheep pen that encroaches on Ketil's pasture by a few feet. It is a small matter, but it is a matter of principle. After attempts to negotiate have failed, Ketil has decided to take the case to the Althing. Now he faces a daunting task. There are no professional lawyers in Iceland. There are no attorneys he can hire to argue his case. There are no formally trained judges with law degrees. The entire legal system is run by amateurs. Ketil will have to be his own lawyer. The judges who will hear his case are simply 36 of his fellow landowners, appointed by the Godar. They are farmers, just like him. Their qualification is not legal training, but their status as respected members of the community. This means that for the system to work, legal knowledge had to be widely distributed. An ordinary farmer like Ketil needed to know the basics of the law. He needed to know the correct word-for-word formula for summoning his neighbor to the thing. If he used the wrong phrasing, his case could be dismissed on a technicality before it was even heard. Ketil is nervous. He knows the basics, but he is not a legal expert, so he does what everyone did. He seeks help. He goes to his Godi, his chieftain, for advice. The Godi has more experience with the law. He has been to the Althing many times. He advises Ketil on the correct procedure and the key arguments to make. He also seeks advice from an older man in his valley, a law-wise man who has a reputation for knowing the legal codes inside and out. These men were not official lawyers, but they served that function. They were private legal consultants. For a small fee or as a favor to a kinsman, they would offer their expertise. With their guidance, Ketil prepares his case. At the Althing, he must present it himself. He stands before the court. His hands are rough from farm work. His cloak is simple homespun wool. He is not a polished orator, but he knows he must speak clearly and follow the procedure exactly. He calls his neighbor by his full name. He states the charge. He describes the location of the disputed land using specific known landmarks. He calls his witnesses, who must swear oaths that they saw the new sheep pen on Ketil's land. His neighbor then presents his own defense. He too is a farmer, acting as his own counsel. He might argue that the land markers are ambiguous, or that he had a verbal agreement with Ketil. The judges, a panel of farmers, listen to both sides. They are not interested in eloquent speeches. They are interested in facts, procedures, and the oaths of the witnesses. They are judging the case based on their own common sense, their knowledge of the community, and what they know of the law from the Lawspeaker's recitation. In the end, they rule in Ketil's favor. The evidence from the witnesses is clear. His neighbor is ordered to move the sheep pen and pay a small fine to Kettle. This system of amateur justice had significant consequences. It made the law accessible. It was not a mysterious code locked away in books and controlled by a professional class. It was something that every free man was expected to know and participate in. This created a high degree of legal literacy throughout the population. It also kept the law grounded in the realities of everyday life. The judges were not abstract legal scholars. They were the peers of the people they were judging. They understood the land, the livestock, and the social pressures of their community. Their judgments were, for the most part, practical and pragmatic. Of course, it had its downsides. A clever, wealthy man who had more time to study the law had an advantage over a poor, uneducated one. But in principle, the court was a court of peers. Justice was not a service you bought from a professional. It was a duty you performed for your community, and a right you had to be prepared to defend yourself. Number 7, even a slave could gain freedom through the law. The year is 980. Thor is a thrall, a slave. He was not born into slavery. He was an Irishman, captured in a raid as a boy and sold in a slave market in Dublin to an Icelandic chieftain named Hakon. For 20 years, he has worked on Hakon's farm. He has herded sheep, dug ditches, and served in his master's hall. He has no rights. He cannot own property. He cannot marry without his master's permission. He is by law a piece of property, like a cow or a horse. Hakon is a fair master, as masters go. He is not cruel. Over the years, he has come to rely on Thorir's skill and loyalty. Thorir has managed the farm well while Hakon was away on trading voyages. One day, Hakon, now an old man, calls Thorir to him. He tells him he is granting him his freedom. This is not uncommon. A master could free a slave for long service, for a heroic act, or simply out of affection. But freedom is a legal process. It is not enough for Hakon to simply say, "You are free." To make it official and irreversible, it has to be done publicly according to a specific ritual. Hakon holds a freedom feast. He invites his neighbors and kinsmen. At the feast, he formally declares Thorir a free man. He gives him a new name to mark his new status and a small sum of money or some sheep to start his new life. Thorir is now a Leysingi, a freedman. As a freedman, his status is complicated. He is no longer a slave, but he is not yet a fully free man, a Bondi. He has a special legal relationship with his former master. Hakon is now his patron. Thorir owes him a certain degree of loyalty, and Hakon, in turn, has a duty to support him. He can now own property and marry, but his legal standing is lower than that of a freeborn man. For example, the fine for injuring him is less than for injuring a man born free. Years pass, Hakon dies, his son, a greedy and less honorable man named Einar, inherits the farm. Einar resents Thorir, who has become a successful farmer on a small plot of land nearby, and Einar decides to challenge Thorir's freedom. He claims that his father was not of sound mind when he freed Thorir, and that the freedom feast was not conducted with the proper legal ritual. He attempts to re-enslave Thorir. Thorir's in a precarious position, but he is not without rights. He is a legal person. He can go to the Thing to defend his status. He seeks help from the kinsmen of his old master, Hakon, men who were present at his freedom feast. They are honorable men, and they remember Hakon's wishes. They agree to act as witnesses for him. At the local Thing, the case is heard. Einar makes his arguments. Then Thorir, with the help of a law-wise patron, presents his defense. He calls his witnesses. The old respected neighbors of Hakon step forward. They swear oaths that they were at the feast, that Hakon was of sound mind, and that the legal formula for granting freedom was followed correctly. The court, listening to the testimony of these respected men, rules in favor of Thorir. His freedom is affirmed, and Einar is rebuked and ordered to pay a fine for bringing a false claim. Thorir's story shows the complexity of the Viking social and legal system. Slavery was a brutal reality. Thralls were at the bottom of the social ladder, yet The system contained a legal pathway out of slavery. Freedom was not just a gift, it was a legal status that had to be properly conferred and, if necessary, could be defended in court. Even a man who started as a piece of property could, through the mechanisms of the law, become a person with rights worth protecting. Number 6, the thing existed in every community, not just Iceland. The year is 1080. The place is not the Grand Plains of Thingvellir in Iceland. It is a small, grassy field at the head of a fjord in western Norway. A large stone, worn smooth by time, sits in the center. This is the site of the local Heradsthing, the district assembly. Olaf and Magnus are neighbors. Their farms share a common boundary that runs up a steep hillside. For generations, the boundary has been marked by a series of stones. But last spring, after a rock slide, the markers are gone. Now, they disagree on where the true line lies. It is a dispute over a sliver of rocky pasture, but it is a serious matter for both of them. They could let the dispute fester. It could lead to angry words, then to a fight, and then to a feud between their families that could last for decades. But they are part of a legal culture. They bring their problem to the thing. This local thing is a much smaller affair than the Althing in Iceland or the regional Gulating assembly. It meets several times a year. It is attended by the free farmers of this one fjord and the surrounding valleys. The local chieftain, a representative of the Norwegian king, presides. The thing system was not an Icelandic invention. It was a foundational part of Germanic and Norse society across Scandinavia. From Denmark to Sweden, from Norway to the Orkney Islands and the Isle of Man, assemblies of free men were the basis of law and governance. The Icelandic Althing was just the most famous and well-documented example because it became the assembly for an entire nation with no king. At this small Norwegian thing, the procedure is familiar. Olaf and Magnus each present their case. There are no lawyers. They speak for themselves. Olaf speaks first. He describes where he believes the boundary stones used to be, based on what his father and grandfather told him. He calls an old man from a neighboring farm as a witness. The old man swears an oath that he remembers the boundary line from his youth, and his memory supports Olaf's claim. Magnus speaks next. He argues that the old man's memory is faulty. He presents a different interpretation based on a prominent rock outcrop that he claims was the true starting point of the boundary. He calls his cousin as a witness who supports his version. The assembled farmers listen to both sides. These are their neighbors. They know the land. They know the men. They murmur amongst themselves. The chieftain does not simply impose a decision. He seeks consensus. After the arguments, a panel of 12 respected local farmers is appointed to be the jury, or domar. They walk the disputed boundary line with Olaf and Magnus. They examine the landscape. They discuss the testimony. They return to the thing. Their foreman announces their decision. They have found in favor of Olaf. The old man's testimony was more credible. Magnus's cousin was seen as being biased. They point to a line of old birch trees that they believe corroborates the older memory of the boundary. The decision is binding. Magnus must accept the boundary as defined by the court. To mark it permanently, they set new boundary stones with both men and the court members present as witnesses. A small fine might be levied on Magnus for his stubbornness, but the main goal is resolution, not punishment. This tiered system of assemblies was crucial. The local thing handled the everyday disputes between neighbors. It was accessible, quick, and adjudicated by one's immediate peers. Only the most serious cases, or those involving men from different districts, would be passed up to the regional thing, like the Gulating. This shows that the thing was not a single place or event. It was a concept. It was the idea that disputes should be settled by a community of peers under the guidance of law and tradition. This idea was woven into the fabric of daily life across the entire Norse world. The great Althing at Thingvellir was the peak of a pyramid, but its foundation was built on hundreds of small, local things like this one in 1,000 different fjords and valleys. Number 5, justice could depend on where you stood. The year is 1120. A trader named Bjorn from the north quarter of Iceland has a problem. He sold 10 barrels of high-quality saltfish to a man named Gunnar from the South Quarter. They made the deal at the Althing the previous summer. Gunnar was supposed to pay him in Norwegian timber the following spring. The timber never arrived. Bjorn has a clear-cut legal case. It is a breach of contract, but the case is complicated. Because Bjorn is from the north and Gunnar is from the south, he cannot simply prosecute the case in his local court. The dispute crosses the major jurisdictional boundaries of the country. It must be handled at the Althing. The Icelandic legal system was geographically organized. The country was divided into 4 quarters: north, south, east, and west. Each quarter had its own court at the Althing. The quarter courts were the main courts of first instance for most serious cases. Normally, a plaintiff would bring a case in the quarter court where the defendant lived, so Bjorn would have to bring his case against Gunnar in the south quarter court. This immediately puts Bjorn at a disadvantage. The 36 judges of the south quarter court are all men from the south. They are Gunnar's neighbors. They may be his kinsmen or his political allies. While they are sworn to be impartial, human nature suggests a certain bias towards the local man. Bjorn prepares his case carefully. He summons Gunnar to the South Quarter Court. He presents the evidence of their contract. He has witnesses who heard them make the deal. Gunnar, the defendant, uses a common legal tactic. He tries to get the case dismissed on a procedural error. His legal advisor, a law-wise kinsman, scrutinizes the summons that Bjorn issued. He finds a tiny mistake. Bjorn misstated the date of the contract by 1 day. Gunnar stands before the South Quarter Court and argues that because the summons is faulty, the case is invalid. The southern judges, perhaps inclined to favor their local man, agree. The case is dismissed. Bjorn has traveled all the way from the north, and his quest for justice is stopped by a technicality. But the system had an appeals process. The frustrated Bjorn can take his case to the next level, the Fifth Court. The Fifth Court, the Fimmtardómur, was established around the year 1005. It acted as a kind of supreme court for the whole of Iceland. It was created specifically to handle cases where the quarter courts were deadlocked or where there were allegations of bias or procedural error. The Fifth Court had 48 judges appointed by the Godar from all 4 quarters. A simple majority was needed for a verdict. In this higher court, the regional bias that Bjorn faced in the South Quarter Court is diluted. The judges from the north, east, and west have no particular loyalty to Gunnar. Bjorn brings his appeal. He argues that the minor error in the summons was not significant enough to invalidate the entire case. The substance of his claim is just. Gunnar's lawyer argues that the law must be followed to the letter. The judges of the Fifth Court debate the issue. They decide that the principle of the contract is more important than the minor clerical error. They overturn the decision of the South Quarter Court. They rule that the case is valid and must be heard on its merits. They find in favor of Bjorn and order Gunnar to deliver the timber and to pay a fine for the delay. This tiered and geographically based court system shows the legal sophistication of the Commonwealth. The quarter system was designed to keep justice local, but the founders understood that local justice could be biased. The creation of the Fifth Court was a crucial reform. It provided a system of checks and balances. It ensured that a man from one part of the country could get a fair hearing, even when his opponent was on his home turf. It showed an understanding that for a national law to be respected, there had to be a mechanism to overcome local loyalties and deliver a truly national justice. Number 4, the decline began when men brought armies. The year is 1238. The Althing is a different place now. The old sense of community and shared purpose is gone. The air is not filled with the hum of commerce and debate, but with the cold tension of imminent violence. This is the heart of the Sturlungold, the age of the Sturlungs. For 2 centuries, the Commonwealth system had worked, more or less. It was based on a delicate balance of power between roughly 3 dozen chieftain families, but now that balance has been shattered. A few powerful families, most notably the Sturlungs, the Haukdalir, and the Asbernengar, have consolidated power. They have bought up Godord, the chieftaincies, and control vast swathes of the country. They are no longer just chieftains, they are warlords. Sturla Saivatsen, a leader of the Sturlung clan, arrives at the Althing, he does not come with a few advisors and kinsmen as chieftains did in the old days. He comes with an army of 800 armed men. His rivals have also come with their own private armies. The plains of Thingvellir, once a sanctuary of law, have become a military encampment. A legal dispute is brought before the court. It involves a member of Sturla's clan. In the past, the case would have been decided by oaths, witnesses, and legal arguments. Now it is decided by intimidation. Sturla's armed followers stand menacingly near the court. The judges, who are local farmers, are terrified. They know that a verdict against Sturla's man could mean their farms will be burned and their families threatened. The law is still recited from the law rock. The courts still meet. The outward forms of the old system are maintained, but they are a hollow shell. The real decisions are not made in the Logreta, the legislative assembly. They are made through threats and brute force. Power no longer flows from the law, it flows from the end of a spear. The core principle of the old Commonwealth was the separation of power and enforcement. The thing could make a legal ruling, but the plaintiff had to gather his own support to enforce it. This worked when power was diffuse. But now, men like Sturla have so much power that they can ignore any ruling they don't like. If a court declares one of his followers an outlaw, Sturla simply protects him. The outlaw continues to live on Sturla's land, under his protection, thumbing his nose at the law. The very nature of disputes has changed. In the past, a man might sue for compensation for a stolen cow. Now, the great chieftains fight for control over entire regions. These are not conflicts that can be solved with fines. They are solved on the battlefield. In this same year, 1238, the violence that has been simmering at the Althing erupts into open war. Sturla Sævatsson fights a major battle against his rivals at the Battle of Orlingstadir. It is the largest and bloodiest battle in Iceland's history. Thousands of men are involved. Sturla and his father are both killed. The battle is a turning point. It shows that the old system of resolving disputes through arbitration and law has completely failed. The island has descended into a state of chronic civil war, with a few powerful families vying for ultimate control. The ordinary farmers are the ones who suffer. Their farms are plundered by the armies of the warring chieftains. They are forced to take sides in conflicts that have nothing to do with them. They long for peace and stability. This breakdown of the rule of law is what paves the way for the end of the Commonwealth. The Icelandic people, exhausted by decades of civil war, begin to look for an outside power to restore order. The King of Norway sees his opportunity. He has been trying to gain control of Iceland for years. Now, the Icelanders themselves are starting to think that the rule of a distant king might be better than the anarchy of the local warlords. The decline of the thing did not begin with a foreign invasion. It began when the Icelanders themselves stopped believing in the power of their own laws and started believing only in the power of the sword. Number 3, the King of Norway eventually took over. The year is 1262. An old farmer named Thord sits at the Althing. He has been coming here every summer for 50 years. He remembers the stories his grandfather told him about the great days of the Commonwealth, but the place he sees now is just a shadow of its former self. The civil wars of the Sturlung Age have left Iceland shattered and impoverished. The great chieftain families have bled each other dry. The authority of the Althing has been broken. People are tired of the chaos. For several years, agents of King Haakon IV of Norway have been traveling around Iceland. They are not warriors, they are diplomats and negotiators. They carry a proposal from the king. It is called the Gamli Satmali, the Old Covenant. The king's offer is simple. If the Icelanders will swear allegiance to him and agree to pay taxes, he will impose peace on the island. He will ensure that the law is enforced. He will maintain the trade routes with Norway, which have been disrupted by the wars. He promises that Iceland will keep its own laws and that the Althing will continue to meet. It is a tempting offer. To many it seems like the only way out of the endless cycle of violence. One by one, the chieftains and the farmers of the different districts agree. The chieftains, their power now diminished, are offered positions as royal officials. It is a way for them to retain some status. Now, at the Althing of 1262, the leaders of the South and North Quarters formally accept the covenant. The West will follow in 1264. The age of the Commonwealth is over. Iceland is now part of the Kingdom of Norway. Thord watches as the chieftains, the Godar, swear oaths of loyalty to a king they have never seen. For 332 years, this place, Thingvellir, had been the symbol of their kingless society. It was the one place where they governed themselves. Now, it is becoming an instrument of a foreign power. In the years that follow, the changes are subtle at first, but profound. The Althing continues to meet at Thingvellir, but it is no longer the supreme authority. A new law code, the Jonsbok, is introduced by the king in 1281. It is based on Icelandic law, but it is royal law. It gives the ultimate legal authority to the king. The royal officials loyal to the crown now preside over the courts. The old Godar are gone, replaced by a new kind of royal aristocracy. The law is no longer a living memory, recited by a lawspeaker chosen by the Icelanders. It is a written text sent from Norway. The lawspeaker is replaced by two royal lawmen, the logmen. The Althing slowly transforms from a sovereign parliament into a combination of a royal court and a social gathering. It still settles disputes between Icelanders, but it no longer makes the great decisions of state. It no longer decides on war and peace. It no longer creates its own laws from scratch. Thord, in his old age, sees the trade-off they have made. They have gained peace. The private armies of the chieftains are gone. The farms are no longer burned. But they have lost something intangible and precious. They have lost their unique form of self-government. They have traded their turbulent freedom for a stable dependency. The story of the Thing did not end in 1262. The assembly continued to meet at Thingvellir for another 500 years, right up until 1798. But its golden age, the period when it was the heart of a vibrant and independent commonwealth, was over. The submission to the Norwegian king was not a dramatic military conquest. It was a slow, reluctant political decision made by a people who were too exhausted by their own internal conflicts to continue governing themselves. It was the final, quiet end to a remarkable political experiment. Number 2, the name itself is still in use today. The year is 2024. A politician stands up to speak in a modern building in Reykjavik. This is the Althing, the Parliament House of Iceland. She is a member of the Althing, the national parliament of the modern Republic of Iceland. The institution she serves in is the direct descendant of the assembly first gathered at Thingvellir in 930 AD. It is considered the oldest surviving parliament in the world. The name itself, Thing, is an echo from a distant past, a thread that connects the digital age to the Viking age. The Old Norse word Thing meant assembly or meeting. It was the time and place where free people gathered to make decisions and settle disputes. This echo is not just heard in Iceland. Travel to Oslo, the capital of Norway. The Norwegian parliament is called the Stortinget, which means the Great Thing. The Storting is further divided into two houses, the Odelsting and the Lagting, both names derived from the old assembly tradition. Go to Copenhagen, Denmark. The Danish national parliament is the Folketinget, the People's Thing, or go to the Faroe Islands, a self-governing archipelago in the North Atlantic. Their parliament is called the Lagting, the Law Thing. Travel to the Isle of Man, a small island in the Irish Sea that was a major hub of the Norse kingdom. Their parliament is called the Tynwald. This name comes from the Old Norse Thingvellir, the exact same name as the original site in Iceland. It means assembly field. Every year on Tynwald Day, the members of the parliament still gather on an ancient man-made hill to proclaim the laws of the land in both English and Manx Gaelic, a tradition that stretches back over 1,000 years. Even in the English language, the word thing has a legal and political ancestry. While today it means an object, its original Proto-Germanic root meant assembly. The English word husting, which refers to the process of political campaigning, comes from the Old Norse hustings, meaning a house assembly held by a king or earl. This linguistic survival is a powerful reminder of how foundational the concept of the thing was to the societies of Northern Europe. It was not just a political institution. It was the political institution. It was the default way of organizing society. The modern Althing in Iceland is, of course, a very different body from its medieval ancestor. It is a representative democracy. Both men and women vote for its members. The laws are written, debated, and stored on computer servers, not in the memory of a single Lawspeaker. It has a prime minister and a cabinet, the executive branch, that the old Commonwealth lacked, yet the connection remains. When a member of the Icelandic Parliament stands to speak, they are participating in a continuous tradition of self-governance that is over 1,100 years old. The location has changed from the open-air Law Rock at Thingvellir to a formal chamber in the capital city. The technology has changed from oral recitation to live-stream debates, but the fundamental idea has not. The idea of a national assembly, a thing, where the representatives of a free people gather to make the laws that govern them all, is the same. The name itself is a declaration of that continuity, a direct link to a group of hardy settlers who, more than a millennium ago, decided to govern themselves in a windswept valley of rock and grass. Number 1, the echoes are found in our own legal systems. A law student sits in a university library in the 21st century. She is studying the history of common law. She reads about the Magna Carta in England, the development of parliamentary procedure, and the origins of the jury system. On her screen are old texts about ancient Germanic and Norse law, the customs of the tribes that lived in Northern Europe long before the rise of modern nations. And as she reads about the old Viking thing, she starts to see faint but unmistakable connections. The system she is studying, the one that governs her own country, seems a world away from the open-air assemblies of Viking Iceland. Her system is built on written constitutions, professional judges, and a powerful state with a police force. Yet the foundational principles, the core ideas of justice, have surprisingly deep roots. She reads about the jury system, often seen as a cornerstone of Anglo-American justice, the idea of being judged by a panel of one's peers. She then reads about the Dahmer at the Thing, the panel of 12 or 36 local farmers who were appointed to pass judgment. They were not legal scholars, they were the defendant's neighbors, his peers. They were chosen because they understood the community's standards and could assess the credibility of the people involved. The principle is the same: justice should come not from an unaccountable ruler, but from the community itself. She studies the concept of testimony and the importance of public trial. A core tenet of modern justice is that it must be seen to be done. Secret trials are the hallmark of tyranny. Then she reads about the Althing. Every case was heard in the open on the grassy plains of Thingvellir. The law itself was recited publicly every year from the Law Rock. Legal proceedings were a public spectacle, accessible to anyone who cared to listen. This public nature was not just for entertainment, it was a fundamental guarantee of fairness. She learns about the modern emphasis on due process, the idea that the state must follow a clear and established set of rules when prosecuting an individual. A person cannot be arrested and thrown in jail on a whim. There are procedures that must be followed. Then she looks at the Icelandic sagas, which are filled with legal cases. She is struck by how obsessed the characters are with procedure. A case could be won or lost based on whether a summons was delivered in the right way, at the right time, with the right words. This was not just pettiness, it was an early form of due process. It was a recognition that if the law is to be fair, the rules must apply to everyone equally, and they must be followed precisely. She reads about the idea of the rule of law, the principle that no one is above the law, not even the most powerful leader. This is the bedrock of modern democratic societies, and she thinks about the Icelandic Commonwealth. It was a society of powerful chieftains, the Godar, but the entire system was designed to place the law above the chieftains. A Godi could be sued, he could be challenged, his power depended on the consent of his followers, who could leave him if he acted unjustly. The ultimate authority was not the strongest warrior, but the law that they had all agreed to live by. These echoes are not direct lines of descent. The common law system did not evolve directly from the Althing, but they both grew from a common root, the legal customs of the Germanic peoples of Northern Europe. The Thing was one of the most sophisticated expressions of this tradition. It shows that our modern legal values are not modern inventions. They are the results of a long, slow evolution of thought about how people can live together peacefully. The idea of a jury of peers, of public trials, of due process, of the rule of law, these were not gifted to us by a single brilliant thinker. They were worked out generation by generation in places like the Althing. They were discovered by ordinary people, farmers and chieftains who were trying to solve a fundamental human problem, how to create a just society and resolve disputes with words instead of axes. The Viking thing may seem like a relic of a distant, brutal age, but its core struggles and its innovative solutions are still with us, embedded in the very foundations of the legal systems we rely on today.